So the next topic that I will discuss is about the social construction of race, ethnicity, gender, and sexuality. So, but first, what do we mean by social construction? We would define that after this slide, and we would answer the question: how does social construction affect race, ethnicity, gender, and sexuality? So to define what is social construction or a social construct, it is a concept that exists not in objective reality but as a result of human interaction. It exists because humans agree that it exists. The common examples of this concept are money and countries. Yes, money is just a social construct. Money, because kung iisipin, money is just a paper embossed with details. But as humans attaches great importance to this as our world deems it as a necessary tool in order to bargain. So that's why money is just a social construct. Moving on, another great example of social construct is the term race. Though we all though we are all part of the same race, the human race, people have used this term to stratify people. Kumbaga, pinagbabahagdan-bahagdan yung mga tao that may be according to their phenotypic characteristics. Example, pinagbabahabahagi yung mga taong magkakamukha ang kulay ng balat, magkakamukha ang kulay ng mata. As long as what is visible, as long as nakikita yung characteristics na yun, parang dinedesignate ka na, dahil may ganito kang kulay ng mata, may ganito kang uri ng buhok, dito ka sa group na ito. So in other words, people have used the term race to stratify people according to their phenotypic characteristics, their skin color, their hair texture, gender presentation, and even their age. So, moving on, there are a few definitions that we must know in order to dig deeper into the topic at hand. So we need to define what is race and what are ethnic groups. So what is race? So race is a social group defined on the basis of real or presumed physical, biological, or phenotypical characteristics, whereas ethnic group is a social group defined on the basis of some cultural characteristics, for example, language, food, and religion. So, pinaka-distinction sa dalawa na ito yung una, yung race, it is only at face value. Kumbaga kung ano lang yung nakikita ng mata natin, binabahagdan-bahagdan or ginugrupo-grupo natin yung mga tao base sa mga nakikita natin physically. Kagaya nga sabi din presumed physical, biological, or phenotypical characteristics, meaning what is visible. So, on the other hand, sa ethnic group, social group defined on the basis of some cultural characteristics. So, ibig sabihin, practice. Pinagbabahagdan-bahagdan o ginugrupo-grupo ang mga tao based on their practices. So, there is nothing intrinsic, for example, about any racial or ethnic groups that makes it distinct from any other race. So, race and ethnicity are dynamic, fluid categories that are socially defined, meaning tayo mismo ang nagbibigay ng definition. So, while people do indeed have different skin tones or phenotypes, the important point about race is what meaning society ascribes to these superficial differences. So kagaya nga po ng title ng topic natin, social construction of race is based upon what is visible to the eye. Pwede nating sabihin na associated ang kulay ng balat mo with a specific group of people, kahit hindi naman talaga. So in other words, it is not the color of their skin that makes a person black or white. It is how people are socialized to see and interpret that skin color, meaning hindi dine-determine ng physical appearances or ng phenotype ang iyong race or ethnicity, but rather the people around you. The people around you define your race and ethnicity. So due to this socially constructed disaster we called race, various races has been at the receiving end of oppression as they are below to what was socially superior or even socially acceptable. So there is nothing intrinsic, for example, about any racial or ethnic groups that makes it distinct from any other. So race and ethnicity are dynamic, fluid categories that are socially defined, meaning ang society ang nagbibigay ng definition. So while people do indeed have different skin tones or phenotypes, the important point about race is what meaning society ascribes to these superficial differences. Kagaya nga po ng title ng topic natin, social construction of race is based upon what is visible to the eye. Pwede nating sabihin na kapag ganito yung kulay ng balat mo, you are associated with this specific group of people kahit hindi naman talaga. So in other words, it is not the color of their skin that makes a people or that makes a person black or white. It is how people are socialized to see and interpret that skin color. So due to this socially constructed disaster we call race, various races has been at the receiving end of oppression as they are below to what was socially superior or even socially acceptable. So, speaking of race, saan nga ba galing ang term na race? So, the invention of race as an ideological concept dates back to the Enlightenment and the emergence of modern society. So the concept of race has been used to refer to inherent biological differences between human groups and to justify the associated idea of racial superiority and inferiority. So in the 19th and early 20th centuries, ideas about race was supplemented with science and allegedly fixed biological characteristics were used to justify sa justify scientifically the unequal distribution of wealth, power, prestige, access to resources, life chances among different groups. So, kumbaga, before ginamit talaga nila yung science to to divide people na there is a physically superior group of people. Yun yung nangyari noong 19th and early 20th centuries. So in other words, group of people has used the term race in order to segregate further yung mga tao, that the people are different to them doesn't deserve the same privilege as those who were socially constructed as superior. They even used science to further their agenda that people of differing races are even different biologically, which in the modern world can be simply proven wrong by professionals. So this in turn gave birth to another man-made disaster called racism. So since we have already mentioned racism, let's define the term. So the term racism, it is a belief in the inherent superiority of one racial group and the inferiority of others. Actually, racism and ethnicism serve similar functions in social discrimination. Both define the others as inherently different from and inferior to the dominant groups in the society. Therefore, racism and ethnicism are often accompanied by xenophobia, which etymologically translates to the fear caused by strangers. Kumbaga, see, racism, ethnicism, and xenophobia goes hand in hand when it comes to oppressing people. So to define na rin xenophobia is the beliefs, attitudes, and prejudices that reject, exclude, and vilify groups made up of outsiders or foreigners. Kumbaga, mayroong gatekeeping na nangyayari dahil gusto nilang ma-retain yung power na meron sila over the other or over the inferior group of people. Inferior. So, in relation to social construction of race and ethnicity, xenophobia has fueled the great divide between various races and ethnicities. This behavior has even resulted to numerous murders, physical attacks, hate speeches, denial of entry to stores and clubs, and denial of access to employment to those who they deem as different and inferior to them. So talagang napaka-harmful sa society ang pagiging xenophobe dahil you are segregating the people further. So moving on from ethnicity, race, racism, and xenophobia, we are now on the topic of sex and gender and how the social construction affects these concepts. So, to define, sex refers to the physical differences between males and females. This includes differences in genitalia, chromosomes, and hormones. In other words, it is backed up scientifically. So, gender, however, like race and ethnicity, is a matter of social definition and social distinction. Refers to different meanings that people attribute to men versus women, which vary across time and place. So let me elaborate. So if you were born male, you were expected to present yourself in a manly way. A gruff voice, rough exterior, no emotion whatsoever, must provide for the family, etc. So if you are not like what I have mentioned previously, then there's something wrong with you. That is social construction at work. They determine the persons must have characteristics in order to fit in, regardless of your personal preferences. You are socially constructed as a part of a heteronormative society where men strong and women weak. So, furthermore, like race and class, gender involves more than simply making distinctions. So, gender distinctions are used to organize the social world and to affect the lives of women and transgender people. As the beneficiary of this patriarchal world is ultimately the manly men. So, ibig sabihin lang po nito, there is a gender differences. Kumbaga, gender differences are used to advance men and leave the others behind, since this world nga favors only the patriarchy. So that's about it. That's my report about the social construction of race, ethnicity, gender, and sexuality. And to conclude, sex has a constant definition wherein it pertains to the scientific and biological difference between two factions, the male and the female. On the other hand, gender was a social construction that was defined as the meaning attached to your presentation, whether masculine or feminine, and how people interact with you because of it. So gender is learned through socialization, affected by prejudice, and is treated with discrimination of certain groups. So though society has been on the incline when it comes to accepting differences, we cannot deny the lifelong oppression that these groups of people has experienced just because society dictates that they are socially inferior. And that's about it. Thank you so much for listening.